Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. This episode features abstract figurative artist Luke Agada, a Nigerian artist living and working in Chicago. His practice examines themes of globalization, migration, and cultural dislocation within the framework of a postcolonial world, as he reflects on the African diaspora and its impact on neo-cultural evolution. Luke obtained an MFA in painting and drawing at the School of Arts Institute of Chicago in 2023, and in recent years participated in shows in Lagos, New York, Chicago, Beijing, Accra, Berlin, and Casablanca. His work has been featured in several publications, including Newcity Magazine, Culture Type, the Pinch Journal publication at the University of Memphis, Tennessee, Nigeria Art Archives, Juxtapoz, and Whitewall. He has also been a recipient of various awards and fellowships, including the Global Warming International Art Prize, Janet and Russell Doubleday Award at the Art Students League of New York, the Helen Frankenthaler Award, and the James Nelson Raymond Fellowship Award. Luke was resident fellow at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in 2023. He was named a 2024 Breakout Artist by Newcity Magazine, and he's currently a teaching fellow at the Painting and Drawing Department at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, Illinois. Enjoy this episode featuring abstract figurative artist Luke Agada. Luke, welcome to my podcast. I am looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Phyllis. It's good to be here.
Let's start with, when did you discover your artistic passion?
It started really early as a kid in Lagos, Nigeria, where I grew up in. And when I realized I enjoyed putting things together, making paper sculptures, and learning to draw from my older brother, the long, quiet, hot afternoons at home alone sometimes forced me to find something interesting to do. And that included drawing and flipping through comic books and magazines for the most part. I grew up in Lagos, the second most populous city in Africa, also known for its vibrant mix of culture and home to the art and entertainment industry. So having access and engagement with, engaging with art on the street of Lagos nurtured my interest in the arts more as I got older.
Do you recall if there was a particular work of art or sculpture or anything that influenced you when you were really young?
When I was really young, I really enjoyed animations and comic book. So the television was sort of my major first source of influence. So I would try to draw what I was seeing. I would get comic books. My first main encounter with art within the contemporary sense was actually on the streets of Lagos, and when I began to visit galleries, local galleries and cultural center when I was in Nigeria, because there was not much access to museums, there was not much access to some major, we didn't really have very functional museums back then. So eventually I started going to local galleries, I started going to cultural centers. And then I got more interested in contemporary art and looking at art within that engage in the global discourse. And then I had access to that through the internet.
How do you define your practice?
My practice majorly involves painting, and I'm interested in painting as a language. I would say I'm exploring the content of my memories and developing a visual or formal language for psychological spaces. I'm also very much interested in how the history of painting has interrogated and engaged with the collective human experience and and has also offered insight into the complexities of the human condition in terms of nationality, in terms of race, in terms of culture, and typically everything that relates to a sense of being within the global sphere.
How do you want your work to redefine the narrative of how Black people or people of color exist in our world?
My work often deals with the tension between the form and the spaces which they occupy, because these spaces are quite dynamic. I'm referring to the diaspora, I'm referring to the existence of individuals like myself in the diaspora and having to fit into this space. There's a great tension and very, very unstable. And so I'm addressing the instability and how that migrant form is constantly having to adjust and adapt. So I would love to really show that, because the space in the diaspora is sort of a hybrid space, and it's one that does not necessarily recognize enough cultural diversity. It's a global space, and a global space is very accultural. It's one that there's a homogeneity within that space. And so I would love for my work to show that tension. I understand the importance of narratives in this time, because as art passes through time, sometimes its meaning or intention, the intention behind it gets lost in translation.
On a different note, what is your process of choosing colors?
My choice of color palette alludes to a range of colors that evoke memories of places I have grown accustomed to over the years. And I draw inspiration from historical images of home in Nigeria. I personally believe that every city or region in the world possesses a unique color palette, and many Nigerian cities resonate with these deep, rich hues of the sunburnt spectrum that I draw from. And these colors hold a very sentimental value and attachment for me. They feel like a part of my cherished memories that I cannot let go of so easily. So sometimes colors even evoke sounds for me. And I find that more muted tones have a very calming effect, whereas much more luminous tones seem to be so loud to me. And I've always borrowed from the color palette of the old masters.
Did you ever paint figures? Have you ever been a figurative painter?
Yes, I have. My painting practice was all about, making the figure, portraiture. As a Nigerian artist, when you say you're an artist in Nigeria, especially a contemporary artist, you must show that you really know how to paint or draw the figure. It's sort of like almost a rite of passage. So you have to get that technical proficiency. But over the years, I've experienced some changes and evolution in my approach to painting. Because in the early stages of my practice, I looked at the old masters, European surrealists and cubists for inspiration. The contemporary art scene in Nigeria is one that is influenced by the European approach to painting. And as a self-taught artist, I was very much a figurative painter, interested in the human form. As I looked to history, I began to observe a historical evolution in the portrayal of the human form. And I saw this with artists like Picasso and Jet Brack in the way they approached the figure and the way they broke down the picture plane into the fourth dimension. I had always felt the limitation of this straightforward representation of reality in what I was trying to do and the conversations I was actually trying to engage in. Yes, I was technically proficient, I was very representative in my approach and satisfied at how well I could make a painting, but there was this wall I was trying to get through, a wall between not just the viewer and the work, but also between me, the artist, and the work. And the need to get through to capture the essence of the human experience within a somewhat psychological headspace was something that I craved. So eventually I applied to the MFA program at SAIC in order to further develop my practice. I never really considered how strongly the impact of moving to a new city or country can be in the work of an artist until I moved. And upon relocating here to the United States, I found myself particularly drawn to the emigre artists of the New York School painters. They played a pivotal role in shaping the American modernism in the 40s. Maybe my own experience of leaving home and settling in a completely different environment contributed to this affinity to the abstract expressionist painters. And so looking at them, looking at someone like Gorky, Mata, someone like de Kooning, helped bring down this wall that I initially encountered. And this change impacted my work in a strange way that redefined my approach and activated some acquired sensibilities born out of what I would describe as an alienation to my new environment. Because I really did struggle to adjust both to the physical environment and even a different way of working. And there wasn't much I could actually hold on to physically because I was used to this influence. I mean, the influence of the world around me while I was in Nigeria. So my memories were more precious and the figures began to be more dynamic and they began to reduce. I began to shift from this straightforward narrative, straightforward representation of the figure to something more reduced, to shadows, to lines, the free forms and the gestures. And my love for the gestures and free form is derived from the fact that, according to the artist John Graham, he said that it has the interesting ability to convey personality directly and it reflects different emotions, something I was actually looking for in my work. And I'm constantly fascinated at the ways that the human species has been able to adapt to extreme conditions. And as a first generation immigrant, I believe it is the dynamic nature of spaces we inhabit that fosters the various adaptations of the migrant experience, whether culturally or sociologically. And this perspective is reflected in the way I approach the figure presently in my work.
Do you think about your audience when you're working?
I try not to think about my audience, even though it's very difficult. I'm aware of the attention that my paintings draw, but I try not to think about them. I sometimes try not to even think about a show that I'm working towards because there's this tendency to attempt to make a quote-unquote proper painting. And in the process of trying to make a painting that is proper for a show or a gallery wall, some things just get lost. It's no longer my voice. It's no longer my authentic self. I'm becoming this puppet, this showman that performs for the crowd and thrives off their approval.
How do you keep learning?
I keep learning in various ways. I love to read. I love to find ways in which I'm constantly exposed to something new that, stimulates my intellect, a new way of approaching my work. I would often go to shows, go to the museum. I love to stay really close to the museum. I'm close to the Art Institute of Chicago Museum here. So sometimes I would just leave the studio and go to the museum and see things, go to a section of the museum I've not been to before. I often pick up new books every now and then. Right now, I'm reading Jack Whitting's Notes from the Woodshed, a very interesting book. I'm also reading Triumph of the American Painting.
Are you influenced by other artists?
I definitely am. I enjoy looking at the older generations the most. I have my pick from different eras, and all of them teach me different things. Amongst the old masters, I love looking at Rubens, Rembrandt, Velasquez. I love the works of the Nigerian artist Bruce Onobrakweya. I'm also a bit obsessed with the abstract expressionists, especially that stage when the artists like de Kooning and Gorky looked to the European surrealists. I'm also influenced by the postcolonial literature of Chinua Achebe, Homi Baba, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Do you feel Black art can be defined?
That's a very good question. It's one thing I've had several conversations around this topic with some folks more recently. So let me draw us back a bit to 2001. In 2001, the late renowned Nigerian curator Okwe Onwezo curated a very important survey exhibition titled The Short Century, Independence and Liberation Movements in Africa 1945 to 1994. So this show explored the history of African struggle for independence and liberation from colonial rule during the 20th century, and it shed a light on the complexities and challenges faced by African nations as they sought to assert their independence and forge their own destinies. The process of African modernity was actually quite slow and it began late. So there was a lot of catching up to do on many fronts in establishing and reaffirming the African identity, which also included the visual arts and literature. Sadly as it is, there is definitely a preconceived notion and summary of what black art is, which can be very limiting. We also have to remember that black artists are not only from Africa. We have black artists from the Caribbean and other parts of the world as well. And although very important, black art is not limited to themes of race, struggle, and oppression alone. Because if that's the case, then it shows homogeneity, lack of complexity, or even tokenism. For example, Nigeria alone speaks over 500 languages. Is that linguistically diverse? So if you ask me, I would say there's more. We've not seen enough. I still believe we've barely scratched the surface for us to even begin to summarize the entirety of what black art is or can be.
If you weren't a visual artist, what career path do you think you would have chosen?
I think I would have turned to writing. It's still something I would love to do, actually. Earlier on, I used to do a lot of poetry and journaling.
When do you know work is finished?
It's actually something that is very difficult to determine in my work. It's something that's very difficult because sometimes I look to, it's definitely hard to define in words actually when the work is finished for me. But I guess it has to do more with a good feeling of balance and or tension in the composition. I would hate for the work to feel redundant as I am constantly exploring new points of entry into the work as a way for me to keep learning and developing a stronger visual language.
What would you say have been the most substantial challenges that you've encountered as an artist?
I think having a good balance between rest and the other life activities and time spent in the studio. Taking time off from the studio is certainly very difficult for me sometimes. Also, learning to say an emphatic no to people or turning down people is still a very big struggle for me.
And what do you enjoy most about your practice?
There's this constant feeling of fulfillment that comes with creating. I risk sounding corny to say it's quite therapeutic. First of all, the work, I experience it. The work changes me. The work helps me to get recentered, slice through layers of thoughts. It's like opening a door and you find another door. There's also the feeling of fulfillment that comes with the engagement, the genuine, honest engagement of my audience as well. Which is to say, my audience is also very important because that feedback, because as an artist, you don't necessarily want to indefinitely continue to make work somewhere, in the corner of your world all by yourself and no one gets to see it or engage with it, or you don't get to have any form of feedback. So on a micro level, the feeling I have when I get genuine feedbacks from individuals who have had some personal experience with my work is so precious. And also the desire and feeling of making significant contribution to contemporary culture is one thing that's both a serious drive and source of fulfillment. I see this big story being written and I'm hoping to be a big part of it too. It's not an immediate gratification, but one that I strongly look towards and expect. It definitely makes it worthwhile.
What are you excited about right now?
I'm excited. I have an upcoming solo show at the end of the year. I'm really excited about it. And I believe it to be an opportunity for me to reveal some things I've been working on and thinking about.
What is the role of drawing in your work?
In my practice, I actually use drawing very differently from the way other artists do. Drawing for me is a way for me to break down the painting. I don't necessarily do preparatory drawings before I make a paintings. I often go directly and work on paintings, looking at visual references and the vocabulary of images in my archive that represent some things I've been thinking about. And so drawing just comes in when the work is done because in the process of making the painting, I am constantly making a lot of changes. I'm constantly thinking, and through the idea or the thought, and when the painting is done, my own learning begins. And drawing is a way for me to analyze. It's like taking a chemical you don't know its or a compound you don't know its components to the lab and breaking it down, and you begin to take it through different process, maybe fractional distillation, as in breaking down of crude oil to different components, and you begin to separate the different parts and understand it. That way, I begin to appreciate the work.
What do you feel is the purpose of art? And as an artist, what is your role?
Thank you. That's a great question. I do believe the purpose of art is not necessarily to give answers to questions, but to highlight certain things about the human experience and create opportunities for critique or conversations around them. And I've always believed artists to be reflectors and conduits of the times. So I think I have the role of not just being an observer, but one who channels thoughts and shifts the gaze of my audience by highlighting certain key elements of the human experience. I also hope to challenge the our mundane perceptions of reality, especially in very uncertain times like now.
Luke, this has been a great interview. I've really appreciate your answers. They're all of them were thought-provoking. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you too, Phyllis. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.